Hello there and welcome to this vlog of June 2022. And today's episode is going to be a bit of a deep dive into the different mercenary units, and we'll hopefully be able to give you some kind of grounding or idea about what forces you want to collect in regards like the official mercenary units of BattleTech. Now, this is predominantly going to be aimed at like new-ish players or people who are, maybe have been into BattleTech for a while, but only maybe collect like inner sphere forces. Obviously, the reason I'm doing this now is because we're about to get like a whole array of mercenary force packs landed on us over the next few months. So this is just kind of like an intro to the mercenary experience within BattleTech. I'm going to go through and cover a lot of the different mercenary units. Not all of them, obviously. That would be a 12-hour video because there are hundreds of them. But I'm just going to deal with some like core mercenary groups that you might think about collecting. I'm going to deal with some things that in regards to like tactics and the mechs that they use, and that will hopefully give you some kind of idea about where to start. I'm not going to delve too deeply into it. Obviously, if something I say like takes your fancy, then go and research that. Like have a look on Sana. That's always a very good place to start. Just read the lore and see if what I've said marries up to what you kind of want, and then relates to the deeper dive that you do on a particular mercenary unit. Suffice to say that my bias will probably shine through here. I love mercenary units in BattleTech. I think they are, for me, the real like touchstone of all BattleTech. Everything else, whether it's like the inner sphere powers, the clans, they're all almost like background setting for the mercenary experience. That's quite a controversial thing to say. I know a lot of people will love playing with like their inner sphere forces, but for me personally, I've never ever wanted to like have collect a certain military outfit within, say, like the Lyran Commonwealth or something like that. I've always gravitated towards mercenary forces. I intend on getting most of the mercenary forces we're going to talk about here, if not all of them. I think there might be one that I don't plan on getting, but all the others I am going to get. I'm at least going to get a company for each one. So I've done my own research on it recently, just in regards to like what mechs these kind of mercenary outfits use. So hopefully what I'm saying is not complete nonsense, and you can at least use this as some kind of like touchstone to go forward if you feel like you really want to get into mercenary collection, which obviously runs really nicely at the moment with the fact that Catalyst announced relatively recently that we will be getting force packs for mercenaries specifically. I'll just go into a little bit of context on what that means. And there's also some kind of important commercial stuff attached to that as well, which I'll deal with before I actually get into the overview of all the mercenary units. So the mercenary units that they're bringing out, this is my understanding, it's going to be separate from the Kickstarter, though you may still be able to get them in the Kickstarter. They usually do like they do allow you to go and get all the force packs in there. They did that in Wave 2, for instance. You could go and get all the Wave 1 stuff. So that might be an option. You might be able to get all the mercenary stuff through the Kickstarter when that gets announced over the next few months. The mercenary groups, though, are all on exclusivity deals with certain distribution agents or like retail outlets. So, for instance, Barnes & Noble are doing one of these. Now, I realise that kind of exclusivity deal can be frustrating to a lot of people, not least of all me, because I'm in the UK and Barnes & Noble don't deliver to the UK. So it's always a bit of a pain for me to get the exclusive box sets. However, exclusivity doesn't last forever. Like eventually they will put these in to regular retail, or they'll be available in a lot more places. So you might have to kind of struggle to get things for maybe, I don't know what the length of time is. They may have announced that, but I've not seen it. I'm guessing it'd be like 6 or 12 months. So I'm going to talk, though, about why I think it's actually not such a bad thing and why it actually makes sense for a company like Catalyst and what it means commercially. Because I think there's a lot of frustration around it, and people like tend to moan about it and say, oh, it's just greed, why they're doing this, and it's inconvenient. Well, if you're not familiar with how exclusivity deals work, we'll deal with Barnes & Noble, for instance. Barnes & Noble actually front the cash to actually pay for the product being created. So you've got to look at it like, without Barnes and Noble fronting that cash, there would be no product anyway, because Catalyst probably wouldn't have the finances or the money to risk, releasing something that might not sell very well. Why it really works for companies like Barnes and Noble, who are obviously a huge like bricks and mortar retail company. They do have online as well, but I mean, frankly, their online stuff can't be that great if they're not delivering to like most of Europe. So it's exclusively, probably going to be profitable for them in the US. But their bricks and mortar, I mean, my understanding is Barnes and Noble are in like every city in America. So, great. And they were a bookstore. They've now kind of branched out into lots of other things like BattleTech and models and miniatures. That makes a lot of sense to me. I think that's very shrewd on their part. And them doing things like this really kind of helps to increase footfall into their store. So, and I'm just going to pick some figures out here because I have no idea what these figures will actually be. But let's say like Barnes and Noble fronted up $40,000 to get the exclusive force packs that they are making created in factories over in China, and then they're just selling them, and maybe they're intended on making, I don't know, like $80,000 back or something. I've got no idea. Again, I'm just picking these numbers out of the air. So let's say they're going to like double their money just by selling it exclusively through them. That's good for them, obviously, but for a company of that size, that's small fry. Where it makes a big difference is on the footfall, because if you've got people coming into your store specifically to buy like a BattleTech product, you'll probably find that person will go in there, pick up the BattleTech box set, and then see, I don't know, like the cookbook that one of their siblings wants for Christmas, and then they'll pick that up as well. So you increase a lot of like revenue sales just on footfall in retail. So that's why it's good for them. It's good for Catalyst, obviously, because they don't have to take the risk and front up cash for something that might not sell. Again, there's an argument to say it's not great for the consumer because we've only then got one place to buy it. But logic dictates, if you look at that, there would be no product without Barnes & Noble anywhere. Ergo, you wouldn't be able to get it. Ergo, that would be bad for the customer. So what would be worse, not having it or just being able to get it in one place? For me, it's a no-brainer. And I'm even saying that as someone who actually can't get the product. But well, I can get it, but no, I can't walk into a Barnes & Noble without, getting a flight to the US somewhere and just buying it in person. I have to kind of rely on the goodwill of the BattleTech community and someone to purchase that for me and then ship it over. So, not convenient, but not the end of the world. Anyway, enough of the commercial. The commercial business. Let's get into the actual meat and potatoes of today's topic, which will be the different groups within BattleTech, or the different mercenary groups in BattleTech. Now, forgive me, I'm going to be looking down here quite a bit because this is where all my notes are, and there's got quite a few notes, obviously, because we're dealing with a lot of data here. I'm just going to list through each of the mercenary units in no particular order, but most of actually not most, some of these have a box set already. So the first one we'll deal with is the Wolf's Dragoons, which is probably what you'd expect because the Wolf's Dragoons are the real poster boys of the BattleTech universe. A weird one, but because a lot of people don't like them. They almost remind me if you're into Warhammer tabletop gaming, they're a bit like the Space Marines, or more specifically the Ultramarines. They're just not very cool, and they just seem to be in everything. They've got the best of everything. Slightly annoying. I'm not a massive fan of them. I will, though, be collecting them because they are really central to the plot in BattleTech, and not all encompassing, but they come into the plot very early, and then they've got a really important job in regards to what happens with the fulfillment of the SLDF and the clan invasion. So their lore is an interesting one. A lot of the fiction books really gravitate towards them because they are so omnipresent in the BattleTech experience. They appear in and around the inner sphere. I believe it's 30 or 5, somewhere around then. If you don't know the lore, I'll give you a very quick synopsis. They're run by a chap called Jamie Wolfe. And he is tasked by the clans to go and kind of do a scouting exercise into the inner sphere with the kind of intention that the clans will eventually invade. And it's a long story, but they kind of do it. Clan Wolf kind of do it to appease the Crusader clans. Say, okay, well, let's just check out what's going on in the Inner Sphere first. So they, ironically, they give Jamie Wolf like, I think it's like several regiments, which is just hundreds of battle mechs, full of like what they consider obsolete mechs, so like old Star League mechs. For the Inner Sphere, that's like super lost tech. So good old Jamie Wolf and the Wolf's Dragoons rock up at the end, basically not at the end of the Succession Wars, but near the end of the Succession Wars, with all this amazing technology, and people are like, where did you get these amazing mechs from, Mr. Wolf? And he generally then goes on to, I believe he fights for, as a mercenary group, they fight or are contracted to every like Inner Sphere power. There with the intention of like collating data and like feeding it back to the clans. So they're very interesting, and that fact alone makes them very interesting. There are, though, like, they're wider than just the Wolf Dragoons, and I'll go on to talk about some of them in a second. So there's a lot you can do with them. They already have a box set out as well. That was the first exclusive they did through Barnes & Noble. That was released around the time that the Kickstarter, Wave 2 for the Kickstarters got delivered to people. I think it was in around like November 2021. I did manage to get one. It's a beautiful pack as well. You get the Annihilator in there. I'm trying to think what else you get. You get the Rifleman. You get the Archer 2S variant, the one with the SRM4s. You get a Blackjack 2. Oh, the other one's going to stretch me. I'm sure you get 5, but I can't remember what the other one is. Have I said Rifleman? Maybe. Well, it's a very solid box set anyway, so not sure if it's still available, actually. I don't know. Barnes & Noble may have sold out for it. I don't know if they've done like a second run on production. I'm very sure, though, that if that sold well, which I presume it did, because Barnes & Noble have gone back and actually like done another exclusive through them, which will be out in the next few months, maybe they'll get like the Wolf Dragoons like rehashed for them as well, which will be great. You know, if you can have like a couple of really nice mercenary units, Wolf Dragoons, and I forget which the other one is. It may be the... I won't say it's the Eridani Light Horse, but I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember which one they've got the exclusivity on. But that'd be really nice. And if you can have them 2 box sets by each other, great. What I'm going to do when I'm going through each of these, I'm going to talk a little bit about the lore. I'll talk a little bit about the mechs that they have, the size of the mercenary group, the colour schemes, and some of the key characters as well. So we've done the lore, move on to mechs. The Wolf Dragoons are actually really very useful. Have a page on the master unit list online. If you're not familiar with that resource, although I'm pretty sure if you're watching this you will be, it just gives a wonderful like itemized list of all the mechs that you can in the fluff that you can get for each like major power. And they have 2 actual mercenary units listed there. So they've got the Wolf Dragoons, they've also got the Kellhounds as well, which, spoilers, we'll talk about shortly. But the Wolf Dragoons are one of those. That's really useful, obviously, because you can go through from each era and see exactly what mechs. You can, if you're playing Wolf Dragoons in Clan Invasion, you can see an itemized list of everything they have access to. There is as well, and this is related to all the other mercenary units I'm going to talk about, if you are interested in keeping things like lore appropriate, there is a mercenary general list on the master unit list, so you can use that to basically do any merc unit. Or put another way, if you turn up to a competition and you're bringing a mech that seems a bit unusual, as long as it's in that mercenary unit list, the TO, the tournament organizer, really can't argue with you because it's there in black and white in the official thing. Although I think with BattleTech it never really works like that because there is such a thing as salvage, so you can justify bringing a lot of things. You can't justify bringing a Mad Cat in 3025 if you're playing in a Sphere Powers. That would be really overpowered. But you can justify bringing like a Star League Lost Tech mech in 3025 that your mercenary unit random have access to for reasons. Obviously, if you're playing in the tournament, it will all be done on battle value anyway. So that's super useful because you can go to that battle value and say, well, okay, yes, I'm bringing the Sentinel with the Gauss rifle, for instance, but I'm paying the extra battle value for that Gauss rifle. So it's not technically unfair. In terms of the mechs they do use, are mechs that are affiliated with the Wolves Dragoons. The big two that I always think of is the Annihilator, which they introduced or reintroduced in 3009, and the Marauder 2, which I believe they introduced at around the same time. It might have been 3010 though, the Marauder 2. So very early mechs in regards to the whole BattleTech experience, which kind of starts in and around 3015, 3025 with the end of the Succession Wars, or at the end of the Succession Wars. But so the Wolf Dragoons are kind of integral to the early parts of where the game begins. But those two mechs alone were seen as real like game changers. They are like, I mean, it's very cheeky that they brought them back because they obviously are able to redesign and do amazing things because they've got access to all the clan technologies. Although at that time, back in 3010, they were there on a secret mission, so nobody knew that the clans existed in the Inner Sphere at that time, and they just thought, I don't know, Jamie Wolf was some kind of eccentric multi-billionaire collector who'd started his own mercenary outfit or whatever. So you can do a lot of things with the Wolf Dragoons. They're a really, really flexible, like mercenary outfit. Again, they do have those cool mechs as well, especially if you're playing 3025. And if you're rocking like a Marauder 2 and Annihilator in 3025, they're going to cut to pieces your opposition if they don't know how to play against them. The Annihilator, not so much because it's so damn slow and it's quite easy to actually outmaneuver. But it's still if you get too close to the Annihilator with those, I think that version, the earliest version, has like 4 AC-10s. That will, with a decent pilot, that will wreck most things in 3025 if you don't play against it correctly. Right, so in terms of size, the Wolf Dragoons are huge. I think, off the top of my head, I should have looked into this before, I think they've got 6 regiments. That kind of, I mean, that puts them at like brigade level size, but I mean, that's just huge. That's just ridiculously huge for a mercenary outfit, especially with the kind of mechs they have as well. Although, important to keep in mind, whenever I talk about the size, of the mercenary units here, a lot of it will be comprised of vehicles as well and infantry. So it's kind of weird how it's not just like, oh, you've got 6 regiments just full of battle mechs. It's like you'll have things in there like aerotech and fighter jets and, demolisher tanks and things like that. So there's a whole array of things that make up the regiments there. But 6 regiments is still huge. That's like just an insane amount of like drop ships and leopards and loads of. They're basically just like they do eventually, ironically, get their own planet, the Wolf Dragoons. Long story, but they are like a nation as opposed to a mercenary outfit in a lot of ways. Their colour schemes, again, they've got 6 regiments. If you go on the colour compendium, I never remember the name of that. It will list you, or it will tell you there the colours of each one. If you want to play like the Alpha Regiment, though, they are orange and black. They look pretty cool as well. I've got to say, I probably will do my Wolf Dragoons Force up as the Alpha, because that orange and black is a really nice colour combination. In terms of characters, now, we've obviously got good old Colonel Jamie Wolf. He traditionally pilots an Archer. It's the 2W variant. It's a variant that I believe was created for him because it's listed in the lore as a 3010 mech. So that would coincide with the development of like the Annihilator and the Marauder 2. And the 2W version, just again off the top of my head, I think it's exactly the same as a regular Archer, apart from it replaces the 2 rear M lasers with 2 SRM4s in the side torsos, which is obviously better because I don't think anyone's really keen on rear weaponry, especially if you've got a mech warrior as good as Jamie Wolf, because he's got some real skills. He's a top level mech warrior, so that's pretty strong. It's a pretty solid Archer, very solid Archer actually. But it'll cost you a lot in battle volume though if you want to play him. He then also he migrates up to a summoner when the clan invasion occurs. He does get access to a summoner. Summoner is a real quintessential clan mech. For me though, it's not the best. I think out of the trinity of those very famous clan mechs, so like the Mad Cat, the Vulture, well, I'll give them the clan name, sorry, the Timberwolf, the Mad Dog, and the Summoner, It's the worst one, I think, by somewhere. I think the Mad Dog and the Timberwolf eclipse it pretty comprehensively. A lot of people might not agree with that. It's just my own personal opinion. But still, again, with a mech warrior as good as Jamie Wolf, it will be a very, very solid mech. Other ideas for mechs to bring them in for characters. They've got quite a famous character called Brian Cameron. He brings the Hellbringer. I think he's like the communications expert in the Wolf Dragoons in one of the books. So, and that makes sense because the Hellbringer has so much like that newfangled equipment on there. Like I think it's got ECM probes and ECMs and Beagle active probes, things like that. Or it's got at least some of them on there. So it makes sense to put a comm specialist in there. And then you've got, I can never say her name as well, I think it's Maeve Wolf. She becomes a character in this eventually, very interesting character. I won't go into a lot, though we don't have time here. She rocks a Thunderbolt, and it's the TDR-9W version. I believe that's the jump-capable Thunderbolt. So there you are. They're the real poster children for the mercenary outfits. That's the Wolf Dragoons. The next two we're going to deal with, and I'll go through these relatively quickly. These are like subcategories within the Wolf Dragoons, or affiliated to the Wolf Dragoons on some level. The first is the Black Widow Company. Very, very famous, really central to the BattleTech lore early on. Obviously, it's Natasha Kerensky's group. I think like they are amazing and they're really cool. And Natasha Kerensky's just a goddess. She obviously, she flits around between different battle mechs as well. It's a really small outfit, this though. It literally is just a company. And it's kind of, I think it's like Jamie's like black sheep company. Like he's just like, oh, the trouble causers, just stick them in with Natasha. So they do have those like almost like the workmen mechs of the 3025 era. So for instance, like Natasha pilots a Warhammer early on. They've also got access to like Marauders and Griffins, and so like the very early stuff within like the BattleTech gaming system from the 80s. She really is like the poster child for the whole IP as well as Natasha Kerensky. They are a company. I think they eventually migrate on to be a battalion or battalion size. Not too sure about that though. I think that's what I read once. They have the coolest colour scheme in the game, which is red and black. Just the mechs look glorious, especially like Natasha Kerensky's Warhammer, just absolutely fantastic. In terms of famous characters, there's obviously Natasha. She pilots multiple mechs across her career. I believe she starts in a Marauder. She then loses that Marauder to the Bounty Hunter. Suppose I'm not going to cover the Bounty Hunter here. I don't really consider him part of the core mercenary. He's a little bit, or she, because we don't really know who it is a little bit different. So I won't talk about that too much here. But Natasha's story really kind of goes hand in hand with the Bounty Hunter early on. So anyway, she loses that Marauder. She then migrates to a Warhammer. When the clans invade, she actually then goes and pilots a Timberwolf. But eventually what she is famous for is the Direwolf, the Widowmaker Direwolf variant, which is an absolute beast of a mech. It's got like I think it's got like a UAC 20 inbuilt, so it's an absolute monster. She doesn't have that for very long though, because she is killed at some point in the story, but she's so like omnipresent in the early days of BattleTech that when she's kind of in the Timberwolf and the Direwolf, the story's kind of moved on from her a little bit, and it's really then focused on like the clans and even like the other mercenary groups like the Kellhounds and things like that. But early on, she's like super important. The next group who are affiliated through the Wolf Dragoons, but not really, but I'll talk about that when I discuss the lore, are the Snords Irregulars. These are actually my favourite group attached to the Wolf Dragoons because their lore's really, really interesting. Basically, Cranston Snord, who is the founder, he kind of came into the Inner Sphere with Jamie Wolf with the intention of like doing some treasure hunting, and they had some kind of falling out or something. To be honest, I've read the books years ago and I can't remember the lore off the top of my head. I didn't have time really to research it this week either. One day I might go back and read all that and do a proper video on the Snords Regulars because they're really fun. But Cranston basically ends up like a penniless like wastrel with his like broken down archer. This is like very early on in BattleTech. I think it's like 30 or 7 era. And he ends up winning, again, I can't remember the details, but he wins like mechs or a dropship, something like that, from in like a card game, and he's able to kind of build up his force from scratch. He's also, there's like lots of crazy stuff about him. Like Jamie Wolf is paranoid that he's going to spill the beans on who the Wolf's Dragoons are. So apparently he like hires some, I think it's like a pair of twins to stay close to him but assassinate him if he like starts getting drunk and telling people about the clans. His daughter's really important to this as well. We'll talk about her when I talk about the characters. There's also a bit of a conspiracy theory about Cranston Snord in that he's not actually part of the Clan Wolf. He's actually part of Clan Goliath Scorpion, which is interesting. And do you know what? I read that ages ago somewhere, and I can't find the citation anymore. But I'm sure maybe it might be in their book. You know, that you can get like the Snords Irregulars like book that kind of goes through all their lore and history and the mechs they use and things like that. And I'm sure it's in there somewhere that there's kind of something about him that's attached to Clan Goliath Scorpion. So that's interesting because Clan Goliath Scorpion are really quite an interesting clan. In terms of the what they do, and I've just cited this really, they do a lot of treasure hunting. So they're constantly on the lookout for like that old Star League tech, trying to kind of get old information. He's like a bit of a historian, that kind of thing. So really interesting character. In terms of the mechs that they use, it's very much like the quintessential 30-25 list. So Cranston himself pilots an archer. He moves on to something else. Does he move on to a bombardier eventually, I want to say? I could be completely wrong in that. It just sprang into my mind. But I know that he swaps BattleTech round. His battle mech round. If you go through their list, though, it really is like early days. A bit like the Black Widow company, slightly lighter. Like you just see a lot of those like early day battle mechs in there. Nothing too fancy, no clan tech, anything like that. Eventually, though, that changed a little bit. They do get more proficient. But again, I'll talk about that when I talk about characters. They are very small. Like that's another thing. Like they're not a huge. At most, I think they get up to like regimental levels. So 3 companies. That again may expand as we get into the later years because I think they do become more competent. Color schemes is quite an interesting one here. They don't have any standard color schemes. But his daughter rocks one of the coolest mechs in BattleTech. So anyway, let's get on. I've cited it enough times. Let's get on to the characters because that's really the interesting part of the Snords Irregulars. So they have obviously Cranston's in the Archer, but it's his daughter who's the central character. Now early on, she actually pilots. This is Rhonda Snord. She pilots a Shadowhawk. Now I managed to get hold of. I don't know, I must have good karma or something, because I managed to get hold of one of the unseen metal Shadowhawks quite recently. Now, I'm debating whether to give that to her or whether to give it to someone in the Grey Death Legion, which we'll talk about in a while. But if I get that, she's going to get like a super cool like paint job on that Shadowhawk. I'm going to go a little bit eclectic with the Snords Regulars because they don't have like a colour scheme. They're basically just pirate treasure hunters, effectively. But eventually she migrates to a Highlander. And it's one of the coolest mechs in all of BattleTech. It's pink. I think it's got like something written on the Gauss rifle, like heavy metal or something like that. And she's attached like speakers to the outside of the Highlander that blare out like old 50s music. As almost like a distraction to the enemy. So she's just cool. Not much more you can say. Like the artwork for her is great as well. She's got like I think she's like she's obsessed with Elvis, which is kind of weird because you think, well, would someone 1,000 years in the future be obsessed with Elvis? Probably not. But again, it's an 80s game, and whatever. People writing this probably grew up with Elvis, so fine, I get it. So that's the Snords Irregulars. They neither they or the Black Widow company will actually be getting a box set of their own, but all those mechs there, like you can get the Highlander in the new plastics. You can get the Warhammer as well. So you can just give them over to those 2 mercenary outfits if you want to make them. Next up, then, so moving away now from Wolf's Dragoons, there's enough of them because they're huge. We'll go now into the Iridani Lighthorse. Now, the Iridani Lighthorse, for me, are one of the most romantic groups in BattleTech. They were part of the Star League. They were a big outfit, big armed force in the Star League defense force. Very, very central to that story, because when the SLDF vanished and during the Exodus, the Iridani Lighthorse stayed behind. So they were a very proficient group, very powerful, very influential, and good as well. They're kind of like the genuine good guys within BattleTech. They're not evil or wicked or crazy or anything like that. Why they're really romantic, though, is because obviously they have this thing that eventually it's part of their history and what they believe, that eventually the Kerenskys descendants will come back and save the Inner Sphere for itself. They're just waiting for their time. And obviously, it's the clans that return, and it's horrendous. And the Iridani Lighthorse, the story is that they're so traumatized by what happens, they basically just ask to be taken off all active duty for a year, just to get over it. And then after a year, they go back and fight hard, and they fight the clans very, very hard. They're central to Operation Bulldog. So when they actually snuff out Smoke Jaguar, the Iridani Lighthorse are one of the key groups, putting in the final knife in the back of, in the front of Clan Smoke Jaguar, so they kind of get their revenge. This is getting released as a box set as well. Quite an unusual box set, though, because the Iridani Lighthorse, as the name suggests, they like their light and medium mechs. The box set coming out is full of heavy and assaults. But I get that, because obviously the assault and heavies are more, they sell more products on that line probably. In fact, I know they will, because people tend to gravitate towards heavy and assault mechs. So if you're going to do an exclusivity deal, I doubt very much you're going to want a lance full of 20 and 25 tonners. You're going to want the big beasts. So that's what you get with the Iridani Lighthorse. But again, just be slightly careful with that box set, because there are mechs in there that they absolutely would use. And they do use assault and heavies as well, but it's not really reflected. I wouldn't go and buy if you wanted to do the Iridani Lighthorse completely, I wouldn't go and buy 8 of their box sets. Maybe get 1 or 2 of them, and then supplement it with a regular force packs. In terms of the mechs, they have for the 3025 era, they're really kind of a really proficient group. They've got top end Inner Sphere technology. I'm guessing as well they'd have some stores from the old Star League. They won't have been daft enough, I imagine, to kind of throw all their kind of Star League mechs into the Succession War. So they probably do have some amazing tech still hanging around. They also, I've said this already, but they really kind of love their lights and mediums, because they're a cavalry unit basically, and so they'll go in at high speed, high maneuverability. But they do have a lot of what they term brevet generals, which are kind of the leaders. They usually pilot the assaults. Not always, obviously they have assaults, but their main characters tend to kind of get into the assault mechs, presumably because they're going to be running things from back line, so they'll be directing the lights and the mediums. In terms of size, it's pretty hard to tell. I'd say they're a brigade, so they're really quite big. That's usually 3 measurements, so you're talking hundreds of battle mechs there. Colour is olive drab. That's the traditional colour of the Star League as well, so that makes sense. In terms of characters, they don't really have any kind of standouts. I'm not sure if they have any books per se or anything attached to them, but they've got one of the famous ones is Brevet General Nathan L. Armstrong and Brevet General William Eric Peterson. They both pilot Atlases. We've got, I think the famous one amongst them, the one that kind of gets a lot of traction, is Brevet General Ariana Winston. She's in a Cyclops, and another person I came across in this was Lieutenant General Edwin Amis, who pilots an Orion. So I can, they're all obviously assaults or heavy, so they do have that flavour within their kind of capacity and mechs as well. Next up, we got the Hanson's Rough Riders. They're also getting a box set, released over the next few months. Really a unit that are associated with the Steiners, Davians and Fedcom. They've got a bit of a rowdy reputation, but very, very competent, always in the thick of the action. Not bad, but bad boys. Maybe filter in between, maybe being seen as evil, but not really. They're just a bit rowdy and maybe like to drink a little bit too much. Pretty cool as well. They've got a really nice badge. It's like the horn skull. It's cool. It's a nice badge. I'll be doing certainly at least a company of the Hanson's Rough Riders over the next few months. In terms of their mechs, they really do just love to use their assaults and heavies. I've always associated them with mechs like the Pillager, but there are plenty of other mechs, like, obviously being very much affiliated with that, like Fedcom, they're going to have access to things like atlases, things like that. Size, they don't look too big around like the regiment size, so quite easy to manage. Colour scheme's cool. It's like a midnight blue, dark blue with a little bit of like maybe lighter blue piping, so it was very, very cool. Again, not something that there's like a vast amount of lore on, but when I've kind of been looking into it, the character that I was keen to get was Gerhard Hansen, who pilots a Cyclops, so again another 90-ton mech. And that's not to say that they don't have light mechs. I think you can, if you were going to use light mechs for them, I'd go for things like a Wolfhound. I also get the impression they'd love their like melee mechs as well, so maybe try and get like Hatchet Men, Axemen, things like that in there. Right, next up we have got the Northwind Highlanders, who are one of my favourite groups, the great group, the Northwind Highlanders. Really, really old. They have a wonderful reputation, very, very famous like mercenary outfit. They were actually founded in 2362, so very, very old. They hail from the planet of Northwind, as the clue suggests. That's a planet that's, if you're kind of looking at the 2D map of BattleTech, it's south of Terra. Usually when you get into 3025, it's in the Capellan Confederation. What's really stand out about the Northwind Highlanders, though, is they've got a lot of ties to basically the Royal Blackwatch. Blackwatch are basically the Royal Regiment of the Camerons, and they actually used to choose their mech warriors through the cream of the Northwind Highlanders, so there's like a connection there. In terms of mechs, they've got a real nice variation because they are very, very big, as I'll talk about in a second. Obviously, they love their Highlanders. That 90-ton mech, gorgeous mech as well, one of my favourites. They'll also use things, predominantly they are in Capellan space, so you kind of see things there like catapults. They also have things like the Galaglass, which is a late era mech for me. It's like 3050s. If you look at there are tables you can get for for most of the mech units where it's just like a random roll table for forces. You see weird mechs in there as well, like the Night Star, which is quite a rare mech. So they obviously have access to some really cool stuff, which doesn't surprise me because they are huge and very successful. So they've probably kept some things hidden behind closed doors that they'll use for special occasions, like the Night Star, which is very much not a mech that people really see in around 3025. In terms of size, they're absolutely massive. I'd actually guess they are a division, but it depends how you see them, because at the very least they are 3 brigades. They're comprised of lots of like sub-commands as well. So you have things like, there are 2 here that I know of. So MacLeod's regiment and the 1st Kearney Highlanders. There are like several of those which have all got their own regiments. So they're absolutely massive. Colour schemes, it's like a light brown grey camo. Very nice. They've got a really cool like logo as well. And again, you can actually get logos for each of the specific sub-commands. So they've really been like fleshed out. More characters than I could ever talk about. They're just massive. But I'll deal with just one here, and that's Colonel William MacLeod. He's quite famous in BattleTech. He actually pilots a Galaglass. That's the model that I've got for him anyway. That's a late era mech, so William MacLeod's very much in like post Clan Invasion. I think he's around for a long time, but that's where I kind of know him, and that's where he kind of sits in terms of my force. That's where I use the Northwind Highlanders. I think in the early days they're a little bit overpowered, to say the least. When they're rocking up with like Highlanders, I'm not sure how much I'd be using them in narrative play because they're just great. But when you get into the Clan Invasion, they're really, really useful because they've got access to some really cool mechs. Right then, so next up we've got the Kellhounds. Again, one of the real poster boys of BattleTech. Really, really important. Morgan Kell and Patrick Kell, again, I'm not going to go into the fluff on them because they're just so integral and part of so much of the lore and the narrative books. I won't give any spoilers. Luckily, if you want to collect them, they are one of the 2 actual mercenary units who have a proper comprehensive list on the master units list. Generally speaking, though, the Kellhounds in their early days, they're very much like IS General, so you get anything in there really. They do have the Kellhounds have a very interesting story though in their narrative, and it all kind of ends up tied up with like Clan Wolf in Exile, and they do have access to like clan mechs because of, although I suppose anyone can get access to clan mechs. It's just a mercenary unit can get them. Can they maintain them though? Because you need real specialist engineers to know what the hell they're doing with a clan mech. So if you were going to be strict about it, you'd say like I don't know, the Hansen's Rough Riders really can't have access to a Timberwolf because they just don't have the material or the expertise to maintain it, whereas the Kellhounds kind of do. So interesting. In terms of size, they're not massive, the Kellhounds. They kind of sit in and around regiment size, though that does fluctuate. They've got, again, the cool colour scheme here. It's red with like black piping, predominantly red though. It looks more red, say, than like the Black Widow Company who are predominantly black. In terms of characters, they've got one of the who's of characters in BattleTech. It's Colonel Morgan Kelly and his Archer. There is Salome Ward-Kell as well, who's in a Wolverine, and then there is the son of Morgan Phelan, Patrick Kell. Now, in his early days, he's actually in a Wolfhound, which makes sense, ties in with the Kellhound's name quite nicely. But he does actually go on, I believe, to pilot an Executioner. When he's affiliated with Clan Wolf in Exile. It's quite complex, but he flits around between different mechs. But all those three characters are really quite important within BattleTech. Next up, then, we have got my personal favourite, the Waco Rangers. I think had I not have really wanted to do the Dust Counters full regiment, which I'm well on the way to doing, I need 13 more mechs, which I'm going to wait for in wave 3. To complete my regiment for the Dust Counters. Had I not gone that route, though, I genuinely think I would have collected the full regiment for the Waco Rangers because I love them. They're a very odd mercenary group in that they're kind of led by a bit of a cult figure, like Wayne Waco, born in the Capellan Confederation, but he's not. I never really affiliate him with the Capellans because they're very much like Texans in space. I mean, the Waco Rangers, Texan Rangers, that's the kind of feel that they're going for. They have a legendary hatred of the Wolf Dragoons, which kind of automatically means that I'm going to like them because I'm not. The Wolf Dragoons core are a little bit pastiche. So they're very cool. If you get the old Mercenary Handbook as well, it's a joy to read that because it puts all their art in there and it is like Space Cowboys. It's very, very fun. In terms of mechs, very like early Inner Sphere, so you're talking things like Marauders, Cyclops, Wasps, Trebuchets, Centurions. Very famously, for me anyway, because I love him, Wayne Waco pilots a Battlemaster. In terms of size, they're really, really manageable. They're a regiment, so you're talking you're not talking like a vast amount of mechs there. It's 3 battalions, so nice and easy to manage. Colour scheme is not boring, but it's slightly like... I would have preferred something a little bit more wacky for the Waco Rangers, but it's dark and light brown. The characters, there really is only one character, and that is Wayne Waco, and his legendary hatred of Jamie Wolf. So look into that. If you don't know about it, then worth looking into because it's very fun. Next up, we have got the Grey Death Legion. Now, I would go so far as to say the Grey Death Legion are the most important entity in all of BattleTech. They actually rediscover the Helm Memory Core in 3028, and that really allows the reintroduction and the renaissance of all the cool equipment into BattleTech. Obviously, it's running alongside things like Project Phoenix, where they're developing new mechs. So when you get that combined together, you really get that like explosion in new technologies into the 3030s. And that's all because of the good work of the Grey Death Legion. They're more than that, though. They are very much like an integral part to what's going on in BattleTech. The mechs that they use, again, I mean, the first like fiction books released for BattleTech were about the Grey Death Legion. So if you collect them at source, you're going to be using things like the very early mechs like Marauders, Riflemen, Wolverines, Griffins, Shadowhawks, Hunchbacks, Phoenix Hawks, Valkyries, Locusts, Stingers, like all those like like early day battle mech, so you're not going to see anything really kind of post 3025. You will eventually. I mean, if you're playing in 3050, obviously they will have access to the the better equipment. But if you're playing like early day Grey Death Legion, keep it nice and simple. Obviously, famously, they're the ones that really kind of set the Marauder up, because that's what Grayson Carlisle pilots, who I'll talk about in a second. You can get his actual Marauder as well in the Legendary box set, which I don't think you can get anymore, or at least it's super, super difficult to get. So, but you can use a regular Marauder though if you can't get them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. In terms of size, they're really quite small, the Grey Death Legion. I kind of have them in and around like battalion level at most. The colour scheme is, if you kind of prima facie it's a little bit boring because it's grey, but it does look cool. If you do the camo, or you do like 2 shades of grey, put a bit of red piping on there, the logo's great as well. It's like the white skull with a red background, so that really kind of pops when you put that on grey. I just recently painted, not the full company, because I'm waiting on some from the third wave for the Grey Death Legion, but I think I've got about 8 of them up and done already, so they're looking really quite spruce. They really, I don't, for whatever reason, they just really stand out on tabletop, especially if you're playing like in forests or in greenery. That grey just seems to really pop there. Then you get that skull and that, on the logo. It's just, they're just marvellous. In terms of characters then, we've already mentioned good old Grayson Carlisle, who I personally think is the most important person in BattleTech. Multiple people in this though, like his I think it's his girlfriend or wife, I'm not sure which one, Laurie Kalmar. She pilots multiple mechs for them. She starts off in a Locust, she migrates up to a Shadowhawk, but then eventually she takes on a Zeus. So she's on a bit of a journey there. She's a bit of a Natasha Kerensky-esque character, and she's got lots of battle mechs assigned to her. Loads of other characters as well. I want to talk about people like Delmar Clay. He's in the Wolverine. He's quite a prominent character for them. Davis McCall as well in the Rifleman. Thomas Reed in his Griffin. So there's plenty of characters you can play around with there. Really good. The books for them are great as well. I should have said that actually. But I think the best books in BattleTech are for the Grey Death Legion and the Kellhounds. Are just really, really fun. So, and I think if you read those like series as well, it just you'd probably say you'd need the Wolf Dragoons in there because they're so central to it, but they're so important to the lore. Next up, then, we have some. Actually, I'll be honest about this. I'd not heard of this mercenary outfit until recently. I think someone commented on it on one of my videos, and I might, it may have been that they got developed kind of as I was like falling out of BattleTech in the late 90s, early 2000s, or I'd just not come across them. But I've subsequently gone and researched them a little bit, and they are very fun. And I've actually created a company of them, and that's Team Banzai. Created by a chap, very like eclectic, weird chap called Dr. Bartholomew Benzai. They're almost like a scientific group, but really interesting. They're on New Avalon. They're kind of on the New Avalon, Institute of Science, and they're really, really engaged with all that new tech that's coming out during Project Phoenix. So I think, for instance, Dr. Benzai is really important for the creation of the Hatchet Man, if not the creator. I can't remember the exact thing on that. So if you are doing Team Banzai, you probably do want a Hatchet Man in there. But it's just odd. It's like they're more like a testing unit for new technology. They do get involved in like warfare and whatnot, but I think they're slightly different to other mercenary groups, but it's like a whole lot of fun. In the list that I've created, it's like I think like 10 out of the 12 mechs are all those like mechs created post 3023. So things like the Hatchet Man, the Grand Dragon, the Raven, the Catathract, the Hatamoto Chi, all those mechs that kind of, over that 20, 25 year, 30 period which come out, I've got them all in there just to reflect their real like enthusiasm for the new science. They're really small though. I think they're not like a massive group by any stretch of the imagination. They do have a cool colour scheme as well. They use yellow and black. In terms of characters, obviously there's Dr. Bartholomew Banzai, but he's kind of more on the science side, I believe. They do have a couple of important mech warriors though. There is Yvonne Morticia, who pilots an Orion. It's one of the older mechs, obviously, that they've got. But she is really cool. She's a bit like an emo girl. It's got like, yeah, just I don't know. It's like the Orion that she uses is like a bit goth looking. So pretty interesting character. They also have a guy called Douglas Running Elk. He's in a Grand Dragon. So they're the two characters that I've kind of replicated on tabletop. I actually, because I wanted the Orion to look very different for Yvonne, I actually got the Orion 2C, which is the clan variant. Top tip, by the way, if you want a decent old school Orion, get the 2C. It's a really nice model. The regular variant of the older metal inner sphere variant of the Orion is pretty awful. Like, it's really badly scaled, but the 2C variant is not, and it's got all the kind of same weapon categories. So it's not like it's not like the clan version has two LRM-20s on there, which completely mismatches with the inner sphere. It's very, very similar. So you absolutely can use that as a regular Orion. In fact, it actually looks really good. So little top tip there. You can still get those quite easily as well from Ironwind or from Raupartha. And then finally, and this is the one group that I am not going to create or don't plan to create because they're just too small and it's too specific, and I'd have to go and really find all the mechs that they have, because it's not like a battalion where you can pick and choose a company. It just categorically tells you what the 12 mechs are, and that would just be a bit of an OCD nightmare for me, because I'd demand that I had all of those 12 and I'd have to probably change my forces around to get it to work. But that is the Wilson Caesars, who are the real, like, terrible mercenary unit in this list. Playing terrible mercenary units, though, can be super fun. They're a group that are affiliated with the Capellans, and for being terrible, but that gives, like, a real quaint niceness to it. The mechs that they use, again, it just lists them specifically what the mechs are. It's not all terrible. I think, for instance, they do have like a Marauder in there, so they do have some decent mechs. But when you go through their actual list, it tells you that a lot of the mechs are actually crippled. So even though they've got a company, so they've got 12 mechs on the books, maybe only 4 of them work. So that's the level that you're at with the Wilson Caesars. Although it'd be really fun if you took a mercenary group on like that, or created your own, and then built them from like a company of where 2/3 of the mechs are crippled, and then you try to do missions and build up cash so that you can get repairs. That would be quite a fun thing to do. So that's the size anyway. They're a company, they are tiny. The colour scheme's cool. They've got like diagonal white and purple on there, so whatever you think of them specifically, they look pretty cool on tabletop. There are a few characters involved in it, but the main one's really David Wilson. He's the guy that's like in charge. It's quite sad though. Like, if you read the lore for them in the mercenary handbook, it talks about that a lot of them have got like substance abuse problems because they don't have any money. They're not very successful, so they're quite a sad group. If it was less specific, and I've kind of run out of space now in my collection because I'm going on for like 500 mechs or something. So I'm just kind of like, do I really need the Wilson Caesars? Probably not. I also would justify it as saying, like, my early dust counters are a bit representative of the Wilson Caesars, because they're pretty useless and bad when they first kind of get off the ground. Eventually they become really quite strong. They become a regiment eventually. But in the first, 7 years of their existence, they nearly go out of business multiple times. So I get the Wilson Caesars experience just through my own mercenary group. Anyway, that's it. They're the ones that I wanted to highlight today. Obviously, if you want to get into mercenaries, there are loads more. I'll give you a little tip if you're new to this and you're wanting to think about a mercenary unit, and none of which I've said there, flick your switch and you think, oh yeah, they sound great. Go onto the unit colour compendium website, go onto the mercenary tab and just scroll through all the different mercenary units. I think that's always the best place to start, because you'll just see a colour scheme that really jumps out at you and think, that looks great. Then just go and research it, see if they fit to how you like to play. Obviously, you can do anything you want in mercenary units, but I think it's, if you want to do it correctly, which I think a lot of people do, if you're collecting the Iridani Light Horse, you're not going to have like a full company of atlases, because that's not what the Iridani Light Horse are. You're probably going to want medium and light mechs and a couple of assaults spattered in there. So make sure it suits to your playstyle is what I'm saying. If you love just bringing assaults and heavies, obviously the Hansen's Rough Riders are certainly something to think about. There are other mercenary units that touch on that as well. Tend to go towards Steiner units. They will, obviously Steiner are famous for their big heavy and assault, so if it's a Steiner Merc outfit, they'll probably do that as well. Anyway, I'm going to leave that here because I think that's a long old video, but hopefully you found that interesting. Hopefully there was some data in there that you can use. I think we're all very excited to see these how these new mercenary force packs will look. The actual packaging for them looks glorious. I mean, I just wish I could see them on in the store, but I can't because I can't walk into a Barnes & Noble and all the others are through the distribution centres. So unless like my local hobby store keeps them on the shelf, which I doubt that, I'll just have to go online. But I think if you go into the Barnes & Noble and you see just like all the Iridani Light Horse piled up with the Wolf's Dragoons, that would make me personally feel very happy. I'd be like, oh look, BattleTech's arrived, it's in Barnes & Noble and it's taking up this entire section of their store. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, I'll leave that here and I'll thank you very much for watching and I'll hopefully catch you again next time.